Hey, this is Thomas Mashad. Welcome back to Brain Doodles. And in this lesson of Memory Boost, we're going to take a look at mind mapping. Now, what is mind mapping? Mind mapping is kind of like thinking about a tree that is growing out and out and out and kind of branches out. And then eventually we get nice, pretty leaves on it. And it becomes a very, very beautiful picture in which we can start to learn and really grow our memory. So let's take a look and see how mind mapping can work for us in school. Now with mind mapping, you might normally think that you have your sheet of paper and you're going to just start illustrating. What you're going to want to do is rotate that paper on its side first off. Okay? So get the holes either at the top or the bottom of the page, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be starting off in the center and kind of radiating out. All right. Now, for what I'm going to be doing here, it's going to look like I'm going to be running out of room pretty quickly. That's okay. If you can kind of, work, around your page, and then if you need to, have a second page ready so you can maybe continue an idea off onto a second page. Okay, so if you have a sketchbook, that's great because then you just have to flip the page. Even if you're working with a notebook, same thing there. But if you're working with multiple sheets of loose paper, make sure you have maybe a couple of sheets in case you need to continue on with another page. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do after you've rotated is we have a particular topic here that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to do a book report. We're going to go back to our nice little standard of mice and men. So I'm going to start out with my text, my title. Oops. I can't talk and write at the same time. So mice and men. Now, if you make mistakes, don't worry about it. Okay? That is one thing that we do not have to worry about in our visual notes. There are visual notes, and if we make mistakes, there are mistakes. And we can own them. Don't worry about it. So, of mice and men. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a book underneath of this. It's going to be open. So I'm going to follow the curvature of my first word, mice, and then I'm going to bring some lines down and kind of kind of space them out, kind of leaning out to the left and out to the right, and then draw another curve. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Curve line, and connect. And then you can draw some more curved lines like it's an open book. Okay, pretty cool. All right. So then I could end up doing another, frame up here. Remember, you always want to write out your text first and then put your frames around it. Okay, maybe even putting some text in here. So that's our first thing, is you start out with a central image. And then also the next tip that you want to do is add some color. Okay, so maybe adding some color of the mice and men. Maybe we use some gray to kind of give some shadow to the book. And that's a good starting point. Okay. We could do certainly more if we wanted to. Completely up to you of how much you want to do. Okay, so we have our first 3 points. We start off in the center. We start off with text and an image. And then third, we add some color. The next thing from there, what we're going to do is we're going to add branches. Remember, this is like a tree. Okay, little tree that's growing up. And we started off with our base, and then we start having the branches. Okay. Now, our first branch might be about the author. And the author is John Steinbeck, and so we're going to write out his last name. And we could write his first name underneath if we wanted to, or we could end up putting Steinbeck and then comma John. So what's kind of good is if you can write out at least the last name, really kind of helps us out there, unless the author is really, really known by their first name, or maybe just by one name. But we often might just say, of Mice and Men, written by Steinbeck. Now, the reason why we might talk about him is that we branch off of maybe when he was born. Maybe that was important. So his birth date was in 1902. We could draw a little baby or something like that. Of like a looks like a little pill to begin with, and then we could maybe draw a little head in there. Little baby. Was born in 1902. And then we can also use color, branching off of Steinbeck, that he was from California. Sometimes we might think of California, we could think of it as brown in some areas. We could think of it as very green in other areas. Okay, and we're going to show you, maybe why we end up using this color here in just a moment. You could also end up highlighting areas as well. Okay, so even if you drew a black line, you could end up highlighting that. So he's from California, born in 1902, and there are other things that we might end up talking about that are very relevant to the story of Mice and Men and John Steinbeck. Okay, so like as far as city and stuff like that is concerned. Then from there, after we've talked about the author, we can start now going into our chapters. So maybe I do chapter 1. Oops, let me write out chapter all the way. And maybe I even just give, C1 or something like that. I don't necessarily have to write out the whole word of chapter, but I do want to write whatever I'm going to write first and then connect it back to my central image. Okay, so word first, then the connector, and then from there we can start to talk about these characters that were introduced right off at the beginning. That we have George, we have Lenny, okay, and this story takes place in California. And you'll notice that I did California the same thing as I did down here. So now that there's this tie between Steinbeck and chapter 1 of where this takes place, could be relevant. Okay, and that they're by a river. Okay, and so there we go. Now, here's the thing: is that Lenny is drinking out of the river. And George doesn't want him to, so we could end up saying, out of the river, it's important because we have these two characters. We have Lenny, who's this very big guy, and we could end up drawing Lenny down here as well, right next to his name. He's big. George is small and thin. So we can have this big comparison between Lenny and George. They are both wearing denim, so we could highlight them in blue. Okay. And Lenny is drinking out of the river, and the night before he did the same thing. He drank out of the river and got sick. So we could end up kind of putting a face in here that looks sick. And we could even, bring in some color for that as well. So all these little images that, symbols of the moon that he, that previous night, kind of help us to remember that at night he drank out of the river and got sick. And of course George doesn't want him to. So all of these things, your mind is recalling the things that you've read just simply because of the symbols that you end up placing in. Okay, so this time George doesn't want him drinking out of the river, so he doesn't get sick again to avoid that. So from there you end up doing more and more radiating out from the chapter. You can then go to chapter 2, draw that line out, branch out from there of the things that occur, and if there's some event that happens, so you continue to branch out from there. Okay, so, and like I said, maybe you end up taking this event and putting it on another sheet of paper, and so then you can make that the central event and then radiate out from there. Okay, so the reason why we do this is that our brains, the way that we work, okay, you might think that, taking linear notes would be one way that we learn. Well, actually, the brain works more like a photograph. Okay, it takes pictures, it takes snapshots, it takes lots of snapshots, and it's not necessarily in order. So, and also, it takes it in color. So we put color in there. And it's non-sequential when it does all of this. When we take regular notes and we do it in kind of a linear fashion, okay, that's, sequential notes, and this really almost becomes irrelevant to the brain because it has caught mono. And the reason why I say mono is that it's monotone, meaning that it's one color, that it's monotonous, means that it's just repeating kind of like the same thing over and over. And monotonous ends up leading to something that feels like it's boring. And that's why oftentimes, including myself when I was in high school, is that it felt like I was kind of sleeping through taking notes in class. Okay, so we want to avoid this and kind of explode our brain's power by using stuff that works the way that it works. Okay, so we want to avoid the useless notes and using notes that can be more beneficial for us for learning. All right, so that kind of gives us an idea of mind mapping and how that can boost our performance of memory, of problem solving, and retention of the information that we're learning.